The Shining, 1980. Let's start with one of the most terrifying and iconic scenes in cinema history, the moment from Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, where Jack Torrance smashes through a door with an axe. The famous line, "Here's Johnny," wasn't scripted. Jack Nicholson came up with it himself on the set, recalling the opening line from an American late-night show. This line, delivered with a manic grin, instantly became iconic. Moreover, the scene with the axe, where he literally destroys the bathroom door, was so realistic that Shelley Duvall's reaction, her screams and horror, were completely genuine. To achieve maximum authenticity, Nicholson worked with such intensity that it is rumored that over 60 doors were broken during filming. Also, many of his monologues, where he screams, laughs, and switches from anger to cunning, were pure improvisation, born in the moment. It was the unpredictability of the acting, not just the script, that made this scene truly terrifying and timeless. Taxi Driver, 1976. Who doesn't know Travis Bickle's famous monologue to the mirror in Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver? The line, "You talkin' to me," wasn't in the script. It simply said, Travis talks to himself in front of the mirror. Director Martin Scorsese gave Robert De Niro complete freedom, and the actor, inspired by his own reflections on self-isolation and the search for meaning in life, came up with this monologue on the fly. The camera simply kept rolling, capturing his every gesture, every change in intonation. Scorsese didn't even stop filming, realizing that something unique was happening. Other moments with Travis's internal monologues, where he reflects on the decay of society, also contained a significant amount of improvisation. It was this spontaneity and De Niro's personal immersion that created the most recognizable and quotable anti-hero moment in cinema history. Raiders of the Lost Ark, 1981. Indiana Jones was supposed to engage in an epic battle with a swordmaster in Raiders of the Lost Ark. However, Harrison Ford's fatigue played into the film's cult following. That day, Ford was suffering from food poisoning and feeling extremely ill, so he suggested to Steven Spielberg that they shorten the scene. Instead of a long and grueling duel, he simply drew his pistol and shot the swordsman. Ford's idea was not only a stroke of genius, but also perfectly suited the cynical character of Indiana Jones. Another point, in the scene with Marion in the cabin, when she asks what hurts him, Ford added the line, "It's the pain," which was also not in the script, emphasizing his fatigue and vulnerability. Ford often improvised lines if he felt the character needed to be more cynical or pragmatic, turning the actor's fatigue into brilliant insights. The Dark Knight, 2008. Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight exists in chaos, and this chaos was created by Ledger himself. The scene with the applause in prison, when he's in his cell after his arrest, was purely improvised. The script simply stated, "The Joker is sitting in his cell." Director Christopher Nolan decided not to interrupt filming, and Ledger began clapping slowly and ominously, revealing his psychopathic nature. Another of his signature gestures, licking his lips, was originally devised to prevent his makeup from cracking, but it quickly became an integral part of the character. Even some lines, such as "Do I really look like a guy with a plan?" and part of his sinister laugh, were spontaneous. Ledger's Joker exists in chaos because he was created by the chaos of his brilliant improvisation. Good Will Hunting, 1997. One of the most touching moments in the film Good Will Hunting is the monologue delivered by psychologist Sean Maguire, played by Robin Williams, in which he tells a story about his late wife and her funny habits. The story about her farting in her sleep was purely improvised by Williams. The script only hinted at the depth of his feelings. Matt Damon, sitting opposite him, laughs heartily, and his reaction is completely genuine. Moreover, the famous line, "It's not your fault," its length, intonation, pauses, and repetitions were invented by Williams on the spot, conveying genuine empathy and pain. The cinematographer working that scene also couldn't contain his laughter and shaky camera, but the director kept that take. Williams's improvisation transformed the scene from a simple dialogue into a profound therapeutic session that will forever remain in the hearts of the audience. The Godfather, 1972. Marlon Brando's Don Corleone is a paragon of greatness, and his naturalness was largely the result of improvisation. The famous cat on the Don's lap at the beginning of the film appeared completely by accident. It simply wandered onto the set, and Brando spontaneously picked it up, petting it during dialogue. Director Francis Ford Coppola decided to keep this moment as it gave the character an additional softness. In the scene where the Don scolds his son Fredo, saying, "You can act like a man," Brando improvised the emotion of anger, varying the intonation and strength of his voice. And the game with the child in the garden, where he tries to scare him and then make him laugh, was completely spontaneous, Brando was genuinely trying to amuse the boy. This naturalness and ease made Don Corleone not just a character, but a living, multifaceted person. Jaws, 1975. Jaws faced enormous problems during production, and it was largely saved by the actor's improvisation. Roy Scheider's famous line, "You're gonna need a bigger boat," was purely improvised. It wasn't in the script, but it perfectly captured his character's shock. Moreover, Quint's Robert Shaw legendary monologue about the sinking of the USS Indianapolis was partially written by Shaw himself. The original script was boring, and the actor, a talented playwright, revised it, adding heartbreaking details. The jokes about scars and alcohol that the characters exchanged were also made up on set, creating genuine chemistry between the characters. Acting and improvisation saved the film, which almost sank into production chaos. Guardians of the Galaxy 2014. Chris Pratt and his character Peter Quill, Star-Lord, in Guardians of the Galaxy, owe much of their charisma to improvisation. The famous artifact drop at the beginning of the film was a pure accident. Pratt dropped it during filming, but he played it perfectly, and director James Gunn left it in, perfectly suiting the awkward character. But the highlight was his dance in front of Ronan, to distract him. This dance wasn't in the script. Pratt suggested it on the set, and Gunn, trusting the actor, allowed him to do it. Some of the dialogue with Drax and Gamora, especially the banter and teasing, was also improvised, lending the film a special liveliness and humor. Chris Pratt's improvisation gave the entire franchise its unique character and comedic tone. Pretty Woman, 1990. One of the most romantic moments in the film Pretty Woman involving the necklace was the result of a prank and a genuine reaction. When Edward, Richard Gere, pulls out a box containing an expensive necklace, Vivian Julia Roberts reaches for it, and he laughingly slams the box shut right under her nose. This gesture was completely improvised by Gere. Roberts' reaction, her genuine laughter and surprise was completely genuine, and director Gary Marshall decided to keep the take. Another improvisation, the singing scene in the bathroom, where Vivian sings emotionally, was entirely her own. Many of the moments in the hotel where they laugh and joke around were also unscripted. It was the actors' lively chemistry, not just the script, that made this film a classic romantic comedy. Apocalypse Now, 1979. The scene where Martin Sheen's Captain Willard is in a Saigon hotel room is one of the most powerful in Apocalypse Now. Early in the film, Sheen, heavily intoxicated, actually broke a mirror and cut himself. This wasn't staged. Director Francis Ford Coppola, seeing that the actor was in a deep emotional crisis, kept the camera rolling. Sheen's emotions, his tears, screams, rage, were not staged, but genuine. The camera continued to roll, capturing every nervous tick and movement. Coppola decided to leave this raw and shocking scene in because it perfectly matched the film's theme of madness and the destruction of the human psyche during war. The actor's pain and madness perfectly matched the film's theme. The Silence of the Lambs, 1991. Anthony Hopkins' Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs became the epitome of psychopathic performance thanks to his subtle and terrifying improvisations. The famous hissing FFS at the end of the scene, when he describes eating his victim's liver, was purely improvised by Hopkins. It wasn't in the script, but it gave the character a particularly sinister quality. He developed his slight head tilts, long pauses, and piercing gaze during filming, experimenting with how best to convey the menace. Jodie Foster, who played Clarice Starling, admitted that she was genuinely afraid of Hopkins during filming, even off-camera, because he was so convincing. Hopkins transformed a rational script into a true psychological nightmare, creating one of the most memorable villains in cinema history. Goodfellas, 1990. The scene with Joe Pesci as Tommy DeVito in Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas, where he terrifies Ray Liotta, is the pinnacle of improvisation. The famous dialogue, "Funny how, like I'm a clown, I amuse you," was entirely improvised by Joe Pesci. He used a real incident from his life, when he made a similar joke in his youth, and almost got beaten up for it. The reactions of all the actors in this scene, their tension, their confusion, were absolutely real because they didn't know which way Pesci would turn. Scorsese was delighted, and kept that take. Even in another scene, where Tommy shoots at Spider, Pesci also added his own lines, which made the moment even more unpredictable. Scorsese realized that the best scripts are when the actors believe in every word, and improvise with that level of verisimilitude. Django Unchained, 2012. In Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained, Leonardo DiCaprio, as Calvin Candy, delivered a masterful performance when a truly unexpected turn of events occurred. During one of the most intense scenes, DiCaprio became so immersed in his role that he broke a glass, cut himself, but stayed in character and continued acting while bleeding profusely. Furthermore, he spontaneously smeared his bloody hand on Kerry Washington's, who played Broomhilda, face, which was not in the script. Tarantino was delighted and immediately called cut. The lines in this scene were changed on the fly thanks to his improvisation and total immersion. His professionalism and complete immersion in the character created one of the most powerful and unforgettable takes in cinema history, demonstrating DiCaprio's genius. The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers, 2002. In the film The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers, there's a scene where Aragorn, Viggo Mortensen, angrily kicks an orc's helmet, thinking Merry and Pippin are dead, and lets out a heart-rending scream. That scream was real. Viggo Mortensen broke 2 toes kicking the helmet, and his pain was completely genuine. Director Peter Jackson kept that take because it perfectly conveyed the hero's despair. Also, some of the lines about the number of orcs killed were improvised by the actors who lived their characters. Even the glimpse of a body that was supposed to be Merry and Pippin's was added by Viggo himself. The pain, fatigue, and true friendship in the shot were authentic, adding incredible depth and realism to this epic saga. The Wolf of Wall Street, 2013. One of the most memorable moments in The Wolf of Wall Street is the scene where Mark Hanna, Matthew McConaughey, tells Jordan Belfort, Leonardo DiCaprio, about his rituals. The famous chest tapping and humming is McConaughey's personal acting ritual, which he did before filming to focus. It wasn't in the script, but it accidentally ended up in the take. DiCaprio, who was sitting across from him, was so amazed and captivated that he couldn't help but laugh and literally match the rhythm. Director Martin Scorsese, who didn't interrupt the shoot, decided to keep the moment, making it a signature move for the character. The scene went viral because it was real and set the perfect tone for the entire film: chaotic, daring, and eccentric, just like the character himself. Conclusion: sometimes cinematic magic isn't born on paper, carefully crafted down to the last comma. It happens when an actor forgets the script, completely dissolves in the moment, and simply lives their character. These scenes didn't just make films better, they showed that improvisation can be the most honest, profound, and unforgettable art form. Because real emotions aren't scripted, they're felt, experienced, and given to the audience. Which of these stories surprised you the most? Which improvisational moment do you consider the most brilliant? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so we can continue exploring amazing secrets and brilliant moments from the world of cinema. See you soon.